Hi, I'm Chris West. In this series of videos, I'm going to be talking about playing arpeggios on a double bass. I'm going to start with 1 octave arpeggios and go right through to 3 octaves. And by the end, I'll have covered all 3 octave major arpeggios, minor arpeggios and dominant sevenths. At Trinity Laban Conservatoire in London, my colleague Leon Bosch and I test our students on all of them, including all the ones right up to this top B. Here's a table of them all. I've greyed out the ones that we're not going to learn, and I've coloured in the ones you need to know for ABRSM exams. Now on the whole, when you're playing scales, it gets gradually more difficult as you get higher. So we start by learning the low ones and work your way up. But it's not quite like that for arpeggios. The way we play them depends on things like where they have harmonics and how big the leaps are. Some of the major arpeggios are really easy, and some of them are the hardest ones. So I'm going to show you the best order to learn them. And it all builds up like a giant pyramid. So you need to be comfortable with each new technique we introduce before you move on to the next one. Every time you come across something unfamiliar, it might be best to stop the video, go away to work on it, and come back here when you've mastered it. There are 2 basic ways of playing every 1 octave arpeggio. You either play 2 notes, shift, and play the other 2 notes, or you play 1 note, shift, and play the remaining 3 notes. You sometimes have a choice of exactly which fingers you're going to use. For instance, in that C major, I could have started 2-1 or 4-2. But those are the basic shifts for major and minor arpeggios. Now all these go across 3 strings. If you want to use only 2 strings, then you have to shift twice, after the first and the third note. For dominant sevenths, there is 1 fingering using 3 strings, and here's one that uses 2 strings. Now if it's the 2nd octave and you're starting from the 4th finger, you don't really want to do that 4-4 shift up, so you might use this fingering instead. Okay, so hopefully I haven't told you anything you didn't know yet, but it's still important to be able to play all these patterns with a very solid hand shape, knowing exactly how far your hand is shifting all the time. Our strategy when playing 2 octaves is to get up the instrument as quickly as possible, shifting up after 2 notes when you can. Now I'm mainly going to talk about fingerings in this video, but I do want to point out that when you have these rapid changes in string length as you go up and down these arpeggios, you do need to think about playing nearer the bridge on the high notes. Even then you will need more bow at the top, so don't get stuck at the heel. Start further up the bow so that you have space either side to use more and more bow as you ascend, and you only get right to the heel when you hit that top note. So, back to the left hand. For E, F and F sharp, we play a 2-string pattern followed by a 3-string pattern. In other words, for the majors, the minors and the dominant sevenths, we start the 2nd octave around the neck on the A string. That's all the ones in E, and the same pattern applies for F and F sharp. By the time we get to G, playing this G up here on the A string is already further than I want to go. So I'm going to do these ones with a 3-string pattern followed by a 2-string pattern. That means the top note is all on its own in a position. You have to swoop up to it and straight back down. And if you start on the E string, you can use this swoop pattern for A flat major, A flat minor, A major, A minor, and B flat minor. swoop up and down might not be the last word in classic technique, but it's fine for our purposes at this point. Because of the extra note in the dominant sevenths, you can only get as far as A flat without getting into thumb position. There are no swoops, but when you start on G or A flat, you either have to shift up 4/4 after the first octave, or you use the alternative 2-string fingering for the second octave on the way up. So here's our table again. I'll put an L for lower, where we go up the A string, and an S for swoop, where we do that swoop. And as you can see already, we know enough to play all the arpeggios and dominant sevenths in the grade 6 ABRSM exam. Although I would suggest playing the A arpeggios from the open string and using the tuning A harmonic at the top. Use plenty of bow on that harmonic to get the sound to match the other notes, because all of a sudden you need to get that whole string vibrating, not just the bit beyond the stop. So we've learnt all the arpeggios we can play in the lower positions. To play the next lot, you need to know thumb position, and you really do need to know it before you start playing these arpeggios. You're going to need to have really solid hand shapes to play them well, and you achieve that by playing for ages and ages in thumb position without shifting. It's like if you want to really learn the language of another country, you have to go and live there for a while. It's no good trying to do it by popping over for the occasional holiday. Now you can learn how to play in thumb position with my book, Reaching the Heights. And everything you need to know for the next set of arpeggios is in the first part, which covers posture, the 3 basic hand shapes, and shifting in and out of thumb position. Great, you're still here. So you know what you're doing in thumb position. We're going to start by playing all the arpeggios where you move up into thumb position with a harmonic and then play in one hand shape with no shifts. We're going to start by learning 3 dominant sevenths. A7 is very easy. When we play the dominant seventh on B flat, we move up onto the thumb on the D harmonic and form a chromatic hand shape. And for B, we're still starting on the E string, and we're going to move up onto thumb on the A harmonic and play up there. Now this one's slightly more technical because we have to, once we've played the thumb on A, we then have to move it up to D sharp to form a different hand shape. For C major and C minor, we shift up nice and early, as always, and then when we get into the thumb position with the G harmonic, we have to form a really solid diatonic hand shape. So I need to make sure that my first finger's over an A, my second finger's over a B, and my third finger's on that C. So this is where it really matters that you've learned how to form a solid hand shape in thumb position. For C7, we add in that extra note, that B flat. Now I'm going to try and persuade you to eventually play the top of all dominant sevenths, 2-3, with this minor hand shape. But it's okay if you find 1-3 easier at the moment. We've got 2 more arpeggios we can play without shifting in thumb position. The B flat major, we start on the E string, move into thumb position with that D harmonic and form a semi-chromatic hand shape with F on 2. Now we never play fourths in thumb position with the same finger, so I'm going to play the top note with a 3 directly opposite that 2. And B minor is the same thing, playing F sharp and B in the same way. If this is unfamiliar to you, page 17 of my book is full of exercises and examples playing fourths like this. And it includes these two arpeggios, and also another way of playing A major or A minor, which I'm not going to do now because we've already got a good fingering for those. So here's my table again. I've given all the ones we just learned a T for thumb, and you can see we've now covered all the arpeggios and dominant sevenths needed for ABRSM grade 7. So if you think how long you would normally take to go from grade 6 to grade 7, that will give you an idea how much technique we're adding at each stage. Harmonics are great because they're always bang in tune even when your fingers aren't exactly in the right place. But they can lull you into a false sense of security, and you might be practicing a poor hand shape which will give you problems later. So when your thumb is strong enough, it's worth practicing stopping the notes that are harmonics, even if you don't plan to do that in the end. And the other thing you can do is to play a semitone either side of each one, so you can't use a harmonic. So in other words, you can play B flat minor and C using the pattern for B minor, and all the ones starting on C can be shifted up to C sharp or down to B. So for instance, I can play B major this way. And I can play C sharp minor, for example, this way. So in our table, I put T plus when we can use a pattern up semitone, and T minus when we can use a pattern down a semitone. And as you can see, we've now done everything up to C sharp. In the next set of arpeggios we're going to learn, you move into thumb position, and then after you shift away from there, you only ever play harmonics. Now I've written a whole book about double bass harmonics, which you can buy on Amazon for a couple of quid, and that has over 350 different ways of playing harmonics. But for the purposes of this video, you only need to know 4 on each string. But even with just those, there are a surprising number of arpeggios we can learn. So we've already seen this G. We're also going to use this D, this G, and then this B, which is over this B. And on the D string, we don't need the top D because we've got that on the G string already, but we're going to use the D, the A, the F sharp, and then also this high A, which we get by touching D and A harmonics at the same time. So what can we play now? Well, for starters, we've got 3 octaves of G major we can play. Now when I play this, I'm keeping my eye on the last stop note I played, because the harmonic's going to be in tune whatever. What's important is I hit this same B natural on the way back down. So let's see if I can do that. And then exactly the same thing for G minor. I can also play a second octave of D major and D minor. And I can play D7 as well, using a diatonic hand shape at the top. And to do that, I'm going to put a 1-4 in on the AC before I get there. Now I can also play a third octave of D major using those high harmonics we talked about before. It's actually a bit higher than I said I was going to go, but I'll show you it anyway. And I can do the same pattern on the A strings and the E strings if I don't mind playing the harmonics on the big thick strings. major arpeggios on the open strings are really well known. You see them all the time in composers like Bottesini. But there's a couple more minor arpeggios which people often forget about. So let me show you a way of playing the third octave of B minor. And then I'm going to do exactly the same pattern, one string down, starting on F sharp. And I suppose if you really wanted to do, you could do it on C sharp as well, but that would be getting a bit far. So let's add H for harmonic into all the arpeggios that we just learned. And look at that. You've now learned all the arpeggios you need to know for ABRSM grade 8, apart from one. That's right, they only make you learn one, where you have to shift between stop notes in thumb position. Now that's E minor 3 octaves. And in my next video, I'm going to tell you the best way to play that one. But before I do that, I'm going to tell you a secret. See you next time.